ידליק נרות מקדשנו. يا حيد لا شمخ يتقدش في سيرة لمها قدوشيم يا حيد لا شمخ يتقدش في سيرة عما قدوشيم بيوم طب وبحودش نجمة في مرانا شير لإلهينو. It's one of the only special songs for Hanukkah actually in the Syrian Aleppian tradition that I grew up learning from my grandparents. I'm going to do something from, as we begin, from the Balkan Judeo-Spanish tradition. The song Dakil Tas for Hanukkah in Ladino. Dakil tas, tomal tas, dakil tas, tomal tas, las muchachas menten vas, en Shabbat de Hanukkah, להדליק נר של חנוכה, לגאינה דלקוסינה, לגאינה דלקוסינה, דליה קוסקרה לביסינה, כלס ימיניסינה, עוד días de חנוכה, להדליק נר של חנוכה. Mete la carne, la tandur, mete la carne, la tandur, dañeremos un buen santurra en Shabbat de Hanukkah, 8 días Hanukkah, להדליק נר של חנוכה, תקיל טס, תאמל טס, תקיל טס, תאמל טס, las muchachas menten vas en Shabbat de Hanukkah, להדליק נר של חנוכה.
First of all, everybody, it is just beautiful to see you, to see all your lights before we light these candles. And I'm going to ask Dr. Shulkin, who is sitting in front of her 2 candles and 2 great lights, to just welcome all of us. And then I'll explain a little bit where we're going tonight.
Welcome, everyone. Chag Sameach. I love that at the darkest point of the year, we're able to bring light into our own homes and to one another through Zoom. You know, I was thinking about how the combination of Thanksgiving and Hanukkah of gratitude and dedication makes so much sense, and how it really takes all of us to be able to bring light into the school and into the lives of all the children that we serve. So this was a tradition that grew out of the pandemic, but one that I hope will keep. Being able to gather together for a few moments, light candles, and hear stories from our community, I think is a beautiful way to acknowledge and celebrate the Chag.
So there's going to be a rough theme to what we're doing tonight. We're going to share 4 stories in the course of the next 20, 25 minutes, and then we'll light candles and finish with some music. And the theme that I asked each of our storytellers to look at is the question of, when have you experienced great Jewish pride in your life? And it might be something you want to talk about after lighting the candles at the table, which is, what do we mean by Jewish pride? when Maimonides teaches us that it's commanded that we put our Chanukiot in front of the house, which we've adapted to in the window. The reason for that is because we want to engage in Pirsum Hanes, which is to really publicize the miracle of Hanukkah. And as to what that miracle is, as Jews, we could probably argue for centuries about the precise nature of the miracle. But I just want to say one thing before I ask people to share, and that is what's interesting about the stories when you talk to each other about Jewish pride is how, on the one hand, sometimes we think of pride as defiance. And I want you to listen for that note. How do your stories contain elements of defiance? And sometimes when you talk about pride, you think about celebration, about the beauty and the wisdom and the connection and the meaning of our tradition. And there's times when these two different themes are blended together. So I want you to just sit back and really enjoy to think about your own stories and how you would share those stories with the people around your table. And I'm going to start with Esty, who is a parent of middle schoolers, and she's going to get us going. Thank you, Esty. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks so much for letting me come and participate today. I have twin girls, Tully and Hannah, and when Rabbi BK first came to me and asked me to speak, he was asking me about this identity and what's been inspiring. And I was trying to think, because my Jewish identity has always been so much linked to who I am. And so it was hard for me to separate out a specific story to share today. In fact, I grew up 6 minutes from Milken. And I grew up on the same street as my grandparents, my grandma and papa. They played in a klezmer band. We had Shabbat every Friday at their house. My grandfather made chalot. My grandmother was a piano teacher and she would sing Jewish music. And we always had just Judaism all around us. And I also had my grandparents, my Bubby and Zadie, who lived in the city, and they would make homentashes from scratch. I went to Hebrew school and then Hebrew high school. I was like that super Jew. I keep kosher. And for me, all of these things came naturally. I just had to show up and Judaism was there. I didn't actually have to make as much effort because everyone around me, my whole family, were very observant and practicing cultural Jews. So when I went to my junior year abroad to Spain, I was there for 6 months and I lived with a family. They only spoke Spanish. And I was all of a sudden away from my family, my community. And I realized that before I just showed up, but now actually I realized that I wanted to be a part of my Jewish community. And so I went to a synagogue, I stopped by, and within seconds, someone came up to me, how are you, where are you from, talk to me. And they invited me to Pesach Seder at their house. It was I felt like I was at home. And I felt like the prayers, the customs, although they let me eat, which I don't usually do, I'm Ashkenazi, but it was the best thing ever on Pesach. But it was, for me, it was an incredible experience to just see that Am Yisrael, we're so far apart, and yet so many of these customs and traditions were something that were so familiar to me. And I kept that. We visited a synagogue in Turkey as well. And we came into the synagogue, they asked us for our passports, and they had hard hats under the chairs. And we walked in, and yet again, another family invited us over for Shabbos. And I realized this family, they had just actually lost their grandfather that week. And they invited us to their house. They didn't want to mention anything. It happened to come up in conversation. And I was thinking about here in their time of just such pain, it was more important to let a stranger into their home and be part of this celebration together. And I think I realized too that in Judaism, I hope for our kids, what we're setting up now is something that we create that Jewish pride, that Jewish identity, that they, just like the Maccabees, they fought hard for assimilation. because when the Jewish synagogue was being attacked, they fought to say, we're not going to assimilate. And so what are those things that my kids and our kids can really adopt and embrace? And that one day too, they'll find their own Shabbos ceremonies across the world, and they'll also take pride and seek it out proactively. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Esty. I'm going to ask Jonathan, who is the co-parent of a 9th and an 11th grader in the high school, to share his story. Jonathan.
Yes, so thank you. Definitely a co-parent for sure.
Hey.
I have to say, when Rabbi DK sent out the email, I thought to myself, oh, that's simple. I feel Jewish pride every time we do Shabbat at home, and I see my kids doing it. And more recently, as I see my cousins and their young kids at family Shabbats doing hamotzi and the prayers, and a tremendous warmth that gives you. But Rabbi BK, you intimidate me tremendously. So I thought, no, hang on a second, I have to go deeper. This is clearly not what he wants to hear about Shabbat dinners at the Golden House. I realized actually, as I thought back and reflected with my brother, that truthfully, my first sense of Jewish pride actually came in the setting of a very anti-Semitic school, an environment that I went to in Zimbabwe. They're pretty anti-Semitic, I have to say. You know, my saving grace is I played a bit of sport. So I was okay because I played sport, but Jews weren't supposed to play sport. And my father had been made a judge in the Supreme Court, not really a Supreme Court, we're in Zimbabwe, it's not quite the USA, but it was a high court, and he was the first Jew to be appointed. And while this whole aura of going on in elementary school, he was invited to become a member of a very elite country club in what was then Salisbury, Harare. And I remember him telling my mother that he called them and said to them, tell me, why are you inviting me to be a member? I thought you had a no Jew policy at the club. And they said, well, you becoming a judge of the country, you've made it. You can become a member. And my father told my mother that he had declined the offer and told them that given that that was the reason, he would not be taking up their offer. And I realize now, in retrospect, how profound that was on my sense of equity, diversity, and inclusion through life, how we, the Jews, often find ourselves at the butt of anti-Semitism. And in fighting that anti-Semitism is truthfully where I think the most pride comes to me. So while it's a fairly negative environment, when I think of today's world, I read on the news last night in Beverly Hills, anti-Semitism, standing up for Jewishness is Jewish pride. On a lighter note, I'll tell you that the other moment I had as a child growing up was that about 4 or 5 years later, there was 2 big teams in Southern Africa, those are called the Springboks. And in 1 year, a Jew made it to the cricket team and a Jew made it to the rugby team. Now, if you come from Southern Africa, if you make it to a rugby team or a cricket team, you've made it. And when there were 2 Jews in the rugby team at that time and cricket team, we thought the Jews were the greatest sports people of all time. And those are kind of my foundations of Jewish pride, I have to say, feeling how important it is to be Jewish and how we do care about others. And in today's world, really important that A, we stand up for ourselves, but also stand up for everybody else who's feeling the butts of prejudice. So there you go. Thank you for making me think deeper.
Thank you, Jonathan, for making me think deeper. And I'm going to now ask our alumna, Maxine, who is the class of 15, to share a story as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maxine Malik-Mer. I wanted to talk to you about my experience in undergrad. Excuse me, I'm in my work outfit. I want to talk to you about my experience in undergrad, where I decided to study abroad. All of a sudden, one day I said, I'm going to study abroad in Australia. I filled out the application and I went. I didn't know anyone, and I just thought that it would be a fun experience. And I remember my first Friday night in Australia, in Melbourne, my parents said, "So what are you doing for Shabbat?" And I said, I'm not doing anything. I don't really know that many people here yet. I don't have plans. And they suggested getting in touch with the Chabad of my university. And I never really considered myself religious. I grew up Reform, but I thought that that's a great idea to meet people. So I Googled University of Melbourne Chabad, and I emailed the rabbi, and instantly I got a really warm invitation inviting me over for Shabbat, and I went completely alone. And I have to say that that was one of the best decisions that I've made. It really impacted my study abroad experience because I went not knowing anyone. And then once I went to the Chabad, I met friends that I still consider my best friends today. And it was incredible how I went really not knowing anyone and having no expectations to meet any Jews. And I went and I met these lifelong friends, and it was really incredible how they were so warm and so inviting. They really, really went out of their way every week to invite me over for Shabbat and to make sure that I felt comfortable and I felt safe and I had food to eat. And the best part is that for the high holidays, I didn't have plans. And I actually planned a trip because Yom Kippur fell on one of my breaks. So I planned a trip to Bali during Yom Kippur by coincidence. And once the rabbi heard, well, he invited me over for Yom Kippur, but once he heard that I was in Bali, I was shocked that he had a connection of a rabbi in Bali, and he invited me. He put me in contact with that rabbi. I thought that maybe Bali is predominantly like a Muslim country. I mean, Indonesia is predominantly a Muslim country, and I was shocked that he had a connection with a rabbi in Bali, and I ended up having the most beautiful Yom Kippur ceremony in Bali with Jews that are so incredibly different than I am, with a language barrier. And it doesn't matter, like, no matter what background, what educational background, socioeconomic background, gender, even level of observance, no matter what any of those differences were, I still felt such a strong connection with all of the Jews that I had met through the rabbis. It's a connection that I can't even explain. And it was incredible. I felt so lucky to be Jewish, and I felt so much Jewish pride in Bali on Yom Kippur, as well as in Australia. I'm still in touch with everyone that I've met through Chabad, and that actually inspired me. When I came back to LA for my senior year at USC, it inspired me to get in contact with the Chabad at USC, and I'm so glad that I did that because I met so many friends, and I'm still in contact with Rabbi Dov Wagner and his wife, who are so incredibly gracious, and they really make you feel so comfortable and so welcomed that I can't even tell you how lucky I feel and proud I felt to be Jewish from that experience.
Thank you so much, Maxine. So I'm going to ask everybody, we're going to light candles, and then I'm going to finish with one story and some music. But if everybody could just get your Hanukkah ready to go, put your 2 candles in. You're going to be putting them in. And let's see if I can my candles as well. Okay. So you're gonna have your two candles and your shamash, and I'm gonna ask Samara first to lead us in the 2 blessings, and then we'll light the Hanukkah and we'll just enjoy the light a little bit, and then my favorite story of milk. Okay, you ready?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asar nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem b'azman hazeh.
if everybody could just drink in all the light from all the Chanukiot, and also think about the light and how precious our Judaism is, and how precious every single person here is, just illuminating one another. I'm going to tell a story now, and then we'll finish with some singing. My favorite story is a story that I often tell Dr. Shulkin, that if I were giving the tours, I would always finish each tour of Milken with this story. So here's what happened. It's called Sacred Basketball. I'm sitting in my office late one Wednesday evening, and the basketball coach literally, breaks into my office and says, "Rabbi, we're not going to do it. We're not going to play." And I say, "Wait a minute, what's going on here?" So he filled me in a little bit. He said that our school was in the first round of the playoffs at Milken in basketball, varsity basketball team. And we were losing by 10 points with 1 minute to go. Now, I don't want to say whether this was the might of the Maccabees or God's light that was shining upon our team, but one way or the other, we scored and were able to win at the buzzer in overtime this game that put us into the second round of the playoffs. So the reason he broke into my office was, he said, "Rabbi, the second game of the playoffs is scheduled up north against a religious school, not a Jewish school, and it's scheduled for Friday night. So we can't play on Friday night." And I said to him, "Well, actually, we could, but we don't know that. It's really not up to us. It's going to be up to our students, because we don't play basketball on Friday nights. We don't have games or practices, but there are certain situations which we cannot change. And at times, for example, if we have robotics or we have a Model UN, we will engage, but we have to create a Shabbat context. We have to create a Shabbat meal, a discussion about the Torah portion, and it's really living in between two worlds. But he didn't want us to play, the coach, and he wasn't Jewish. He just felt like that was our mission and they shouldn't play. So I said, "Let's you and I walk down to the court and we'll talk with the students." Now, a little bit more background. The other school was not willing to move the game. They said, "We've set everything up. It's Friday night. We've got people coming for the game. We're having a dinner before. There's no way we can change it." And I said to the religious leader of the school, I said, "I hate to tell you this, but we don't know whether we will have a game or not, because that's going to depend on our students having to deliberate, having to wrestle with the question of should we play." So the Coach Whiting and myself, we went into the stairwell, which is in between the weight room and the basketball court. And we talked to the students. Now you have to know, these students came from all different backgrounds. There were Orthodox students, conservative reform. There were Mizrahi students. There were Ashkenazi students, all over the spectrum. And we said, "We're going to put this in your hands because you have to decide, are you going to play this game or not?" So the coach and I went into the gym and we were waiting. 10 minutes went by. They didn't come to get us. 20 minutes, 30 minutes. After 45 minutes, they invited us to come back into the stairwell where they were wrestling, where they were deliberating. And they said to us, "We've thought really hard. We've disagreed. Each of us had his own perspective. And then we decided, you know what? This question is bigger than our basketball team. This is about all the basketball teams that might play in the future. This is about the Jewish people, and we're not going to play." And they were really upset because they felt, why is it that these other schools didn't have to play on their Sabbath, but we had to play on our Sabbath? And they said, "We are going to call the LA Times and we're going to make a protest and we're going to..." And I said to them, That might work, it might not. I can't tell you, but I want everybody to own the decision. Do you need to deliberate any further? And they said, we're going to take a few more minutes. And they talked and they brought us back in again. And they said, we're not playing. This is way bigger than us. Like our portrait of the graduate, we belong to something greater than ourselves in that moment. And so I go back to my office and there's a message on the phone. And the religious leader says, would it be possible if we play it at, say, 5:30 instead of 7:30? And this was I think in the winter. And I said, no, they'd have to be able to get back to where they were staying before Shabbat started. And he said, let me get back to you. And he called back again and he said, what if your team came before Shabbat on Friday afternoon and we played on Saturday night around 8:30? Would that work? And I said, that would be unbelievable if you did that. And so the team went up and they played this really powerhouse team. And they got absolutely decimated in the game. And even though they lost, they won, in my mind, the most epic victory a team has ever won. And so if you walk through the gym and you go to those steps between the gym and the workout room, you'll see a plaque. And the plaque says, Hisarita im Elokim ve'im anashim vatuchal. For you wrestled with God and with men, and you prevailed. And for me, that was an extraordinarily proud moment of being at Milken and being a Jew. So we're going to finish with some music. And Asher, you want to take it away?
Chazak Baruch, Rabbi BK. We'll finish with some songs. Ma'osur Yeshuati. Ma'osur Yeshuati Lechana El Shabeach Tikon Bet Tefilati Besham Toda Nezabeach Le'ed Achim Matbeach Mitzaram Nabeach Az Egmor Beshir Mizmor Hanukkah HaMizbeach Az Egmor Beshir Mizmor Hanukkah HaMizbeach Yevanim Nikbetzu Alai Azai Bimehashmanim Ufartzu Homod Migdalai Betimeu Gol Hashmanim Uminotar Kankanim Nasenes Lashoshanim Bene Bina Yemesh Bona Kabeu Shir Urnanim Bene Bina Yemesh Bona Kabeu Shir Urnanim. I'll leave
Asher?
everyone with a little bit of this.
Asher, hold on one sec. Just before we finish, I just want to say that we have some of the players that were on that team in 2004, 2005. And I'm not sure which ones are here, but first of all, I want to thank Mr. Mancuda for inviting them. And I just want to say that if you haven't thought about that story recently, just know how incredibly proud all of us are for that moment and to have you here. Go ahead and we'll finish up, Asher.
Finish with this gem of the Sephardic tradition. Hanukkah linda está aquí, 8 candelas para mí. Hanukkah linda está aquí. 8 candelas para mí. Oh. Una candelica, 2 candelicas, 3 candelicas, 4 candelicas, 5 candelicas, 6 candelicas, 7 candelicas, 8 candelicas para mí. Muchas fiestas voy a hacer con almendricas y la miel. Muchas fiestas voy a hacer con almendricas y la miel. Oh. Una candelica, 2 candelicas, 3 candelicas, 4 candelicas, 5 candelicas, 6 candelicas, 7 candelicas, 8 candelicas para mí. 8 candelicas para mí. Hanukkah Sameach, everyone.
Hanukkah Sameach, Chag Orim Sameach, and
Chag Sameach.
everybody,
Sameach, thank
Ma'alin
you.
B'Kodesh, may your light increase
Amen.
throughout the remaining days of Hanukkah. All right.
Thank you, Erev Tov.
Hanukkah Sameach.
Hanukkah
Chag
Sameach.
Sameach.
Thank you.
Yeah.